Hello and welcome. This is March 31st, and you are at the talk called Creating Your Own Sacred Site, Starting with Yourself. Welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled that you're here today. I'm so happy to have you. This is, talking about the earth and the natural processes of being a part of nature is just really the core of my heart. I started preparing this talk as well as the class that's coming up in April, and I thought I had a reasonable amount, and it's like, whoa, I could spend probably a year and still not cover all I'd like to cover on this particular topic, but I hope that today will give you a really good feel for this. And if you want to continue with me in the course, I'll carry it further. But I intend for these webinars to be a full presentation, not just a little touch of what we're going to do, but really talking about the content of where we are. So, the topic for me is clearly not new. If you saw the Fierce Awakened Woman conference I was on just a couple of weeks ago, I talked a little about this topic and in several other summits, and as well as my own summit last year, which was Mother Earth's Sacred Sites, Portals to Spiritual Awakening. So it's quite a topic that I've been working with for a while, but oh my, it's such a special part, I think, of who we are and what we do. So I'm going to start this, really open this with calling the directions. And the system that I use is the Celtic spirit wheel. A lot of people call it the medicine wheel. And some people put the four elements, the four cardinal directions and the four elements in different places. So if this is not aligning with what you may have done in the past, as far as the elements in certain places, mine is on the Celtic. It's not the only, Celts are not the only ones who use it this way, but I just want you to know that because it is different from several other groups. So I will start with calling in. Let me, I had sage burning earlier, and let me start another, just a touch of sage as we get started, so that we have the cleansing going through. And even though it's just in my house on my screen, what we're talking about today is that connection over to the other side, the other world. And so I light the sage in my home, but I send it out to you across the way, across the way, across the way. So I sit in the center, calling in the divine center, the ether, the center of love, the center of divine oneness. And so take a deep breath with me as we stand in the center of the circle, calling in the sovereignty, calling in who we truly are, calling in the oneness that we are a part of. And you can turn to the directions in your home or just stay where you are, but join me as I move to the east. Sacred winds, ancestors of the east, we thank you for illumination. We thank you for bringing in the light to guide us on our path. And we thank you for the wind to blow through and help us recognize and remember that this is our sacred path, our sacred journey as we've come to earth to be here, to be a part of all that is. And we thank you. We thank you, ancestors, for reminding us of illumination, reminding us of the light, reminding us of gratitude, reminding us to hold the hearth, our hearts. Thank you. And I turn to the south. And I say, south winds, ancestors of the south, thank you for the light of the midday sun that comes to us and the element of fire. May we step into the fire to let loose of all those things that we need to turn away, all those things that are no longer helping us, all those things that hinder us, and let us step into the fire and step into the dance, the rhythm of the South, the music, the laughter, the joy, the harmony. And in the South, thank you for teaching us how to fall in love with the rhythm of life. We thank you. And I turn to the West where the waters flow. The waters pour their light energy over us. The waters flow and cleanse us and heal us and touch us. And in the West, the ancestors call us into introspection. The black bear takes our hand and takes us into her cave so that we may sit and listen and learn and go into the dark of the night as we hold that space of learning and caring. We thank you, ancestors of the West. And we turn to the North. Ancestors of the North, you come to us and call us to challenge us to stand up, to step forward, to be the warrior of the heart that you have called us to be. We accept your challenge. We accept teaching ourselves how to stand in harmony and in balance, to step over into the wisdom consciousness, taking that knowledge from the West that we learned in introspection and turn it into wisdom consciousness as we step forward through our paths in the North. Thank you, North Winds. And I come full circle back to the center, back to the place of divine light, back to the place of sovereignty, back to connection, to the oneness, to the divine. And I say, Aho, Ashi, Amen. Blessed be, Hamdulillah. And so it is. So welcome, everyone. And I don't know if you can, if you're on the screen with the grid or the speaker, but if you're on grid, Debbie is there with us, and Debbie is muting everyone. And we are, so as we go through this, we're up to 57 people right now. So we don't really have the opportunity to do a lot of talking on the front end, but I will, I want to present some things to you, and then I will have a slideshow that I'll talk through. But if you have any questions as we go through this, please post your questions in the chat, and Debbie will monitor those questions, and I'll try to answer them as I get to the end of the presentation, of the slideshow presentation. And then I think that we'll run about an hour between now and things that I say and then the presentation. And I am perfectly happy to stay, beyond that time, answering any questions that come in the chat. And if you have any other new questions that pop up, please put those in. So I want to start with a quote for you. This is a quote from a woman named Maureen Murdoch, and she is the author of The Heroine's Journey. If any of you have followed Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero's Journey, she wrote the Feminine Journey, and several other books as well. And I thought this was a very beautiful quote. We must have the courage to live with paradox, the strength to hold the tension of not knowing the answers, and the willingness to listen to our inner wisdom and the inner wisdom of the planet, which begs for change. So here we are talking about Mother Earth today, and talking about the beauty of the earth. We're talking about the rhythm and the cycles of nature, the cycles of the earth, and really looking within ourselves. There are sacred sites throughout the world, But what are these sacred sites, and where did they come from, and why are they sacred sites? And why am I teaching a course on building your own sacred site, starting with yourself? Because you too are a sacred site. And that's what I want to talk about with you today. It's a trying time that we're in. I know some people are still on lockdown and some are not, but we're still in this pandemic and our world has turned upside down. And it's a time for us to really look introspectively at who we are and why we're here, and how can we raise the consciousness of the planet, of the entire planet, raising the consciousness of the collective, but raising the consciousness of the individuals as well. And we've been through some really interesting times. There is a man who is I'm not sure that he calls himself a shaman. I've not seen that title in his works, but he is an elder with the Dagara tribe out of Western Africa. And his name is Malidoma Somé, and he does a lot of teaching, some here in the area where I live, as well as some others. One of his quotes is, "If you witness a crisis somewhere, that's because the ancestors have brought you to that specific intersection simply because the ancestors know that what you have inside of you, you have what it takes to tend to that problem." So we need to remember that whatever our stresses are and whatever our challenges are, they come to us because we have it within us to be able to tend it, to be able to walk through it, to be able to comprehend it, and to be able to raise the vibration. And so that's what we're talking about today. What we do to raise our vibrations so that we can walk the spiritual path that we came here to do. We're on earth at this particular time for a particular reason. And we may or may not know what that reason is, but the universe knows. And so I'm hoping that today you can find some pieces of information that can help you continue on your spiritual journey in a way that keeps you in harmony and in balance with the earth and all of her beings. So I have a presentation I want to present, and then I will take us on a little inner journey as I get near the end of it. And as I said, feel free to put in any questions or comments that you have. And if you put them into the chat, I will try to answer them after the presentation portion is over. So our topic is creating your own sacred site, starting with you, starting with yourself. So what is a sacred site, and what do they do, and what's the difference from one sacred site to another anyway? Well, that's part of what I hope to answer for you today. Our first step in creating our own sacred site has to include understanding what is sacred and then how to connect to the sacred. So right now, close your eyes and take a deep, slow breath in. And then release that breath and open your eyes. You just connected with the sacred. The very air that you breathe is the sacred. The body that you dwell in is the sacred. The thoughts that you create, that's the sacred. All around you is the sacred. So the question is, have you ever considered that you are sacred? Most of us don't think that way. Most of us don't realize that we're sacred. There's a song, it's quite a long song, but I thought I'd put up just a few of the words from it. It's by Peter Mayer, and I heard it quite a few years ago. The name of the song is called Holy Now. And he talks about that he used to go to church and the priest had the holy water, and now all the water is sacred. And his words are part of the words in it are, everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, because everything is holy now. And that's really where we are. We really are part of the divine, and that makes us sacred too. So we just have to remember and step into that light of the sacred. Part of the problem is that we have forgotten who we are, and we've forgotten how to connect to our origin. We're in this, fabulous, fast-paced, high-tech world, and all kinds of advances in science and technology and engineering, but the downside of that has been that we've disconnected ourselves from the natural world. So when was the last time that you took time to watch the sunrise or the sunset? Do you pay attention to the changing of the seasons? Other than the fact that, it's cold or it's warm, do you really look at the leaves as they change in the autumn? Do you really absorb the beauty of the snow or the flowers in the spring? And when was the last time you stopped to look at a rainbow? If you see one as you're driving down the road, have you ever pulled off the side of the road to get out and look at the rainbow? This picture was taken by a friend of mine who did just that. She got out of her car to take this photograph of the rainbow here in North Carolina. So think about those parts of nature that we take for granted, and try to move into the place where you aren't taking it quite so much for granted. We get really excited about solar eclipses. They're rare. They happen several times a year, but most of us have to wait several years to see one actually that's the full eclipse. So I think it was 2017, we had one here in North America where we had a fairly, I don't think it was 100%, but a really high level solar eclipse. And that's exciting. And, we got the glasses and spent the time looking at it. But do you remember to watch the lunar eclipses and the moon phases. The lunar eclipses are actually easier to see, and a lot of times more often you can see those than the sun solar eclipses. So a lunar eclipse, just like the solar, is a time of mystery and magic. And the lunar eclipse is a revealing of the hidden face of who we are, because it's the dark side of the moon opening to us. It's a culmination point that has a release out there sometime in the future after the eclipse. So any eclipse is an opportunity to see more deeply into the implications of how we live and what we do and how we think, because the actual energy of the earth is a little bit different when there's an eclipse happening. So in 2021 we have 2 lunar and 2 solar eclipses. It doesn't matter if you're in a place where you can literally see the eclipse. The energy of the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse actually are in the entire atmosphere of the earth, regardless of what you can see with your physical eyes, because it's a part of that otherness, a part of the ether, a part of the other world energetically that takes us through it. So pay attention to the eclipses. And notice the phases of the moon. On March 28th, just a few days ago, we had a full moon. And coming up on April the 11th, we will have a new moon. That's often called the dark moon. So looking at the phases of the moon is another piece of connecting to the phases of nature. So there's the dark moon, and then there's that little tiny crescent moon that moves to a half moon and then comes back to another full moon. And on April 27th, that full moon will be what's called a supermoon. So it might be really huge or really beautiful, beautiful full moon to see. So the reason that I talk about these things is that indigenous teachers, and as well as modern philosophers, tell us and have told us for many years that a culture disconnected from the nature and the cycles of nature is a culture that's spinning out of control. And it's not hard to look around and see that we are a little out of control. So I'd encourage you to find a way to step back into some aspect of the cycles of nature. If we are to bring our culture and our world back in harmony, we have to align ourselves with the natural world. We have to bring ourselves in balance with truth, beauty, and justice. Now, beauty is not what we think of it in the Western world. Indigenous people call us to walk the beauty way. And the beauty that we're talking about is the beauty that comes from being in harmony with the universe, being in step with the natural laws, being one with truth and justice, and loving ourselves. Ceremonies can be one way to align with the natural world. There are lots of different ways to pay attention to the cycles if you're connected with one of these. There are the medicine wheel or the spirit wheel, which I called in today as we started our session. There are labyrinths that can help you stay in touch with the natural cycles, and the Vesica Pisces, and the ceremonies and celebrations at equinox and solstice, and the other harvest festivals that come around based on the tradition and the family line perhaps that you come from. So there are lots of ways to align with the natural world. We just have to pay attention and follow through with those. So there are numerous sacred sites that are aligned to the sun and the moon, especially at equinoxes and solstices, but other times as well. So paying attention to that natural progression can really open us to new perceptions, just remembering that the energy is different at an equinox, at a solstice, at a particular time, at a full moon, at a new moon, that there's a different energy out there. It doesn't control us, but it's a vibration that helps us to move in a different way if we open ourselves to it. The ancients knew that the veil between this world and the other world is very thin at equinox and solstice. And so they acknowledged the movement of the earth, the movement on its daily 24-hour rotation, the movement around the sun that creates what we call our year, and the movement where we come into to equinox and solstice and eclipses and all of those wonderful things that come about. Spring equinox, also called the light of the earth, just occurred here in the northern hemisphere on March 20th. And of course, that was the autumn equinox for the southern hemisphere. In both places, the days and the nights at the equinox are balanced. Their energies are peaking. And if you're in the autumn equinox, you know, our energies are kind of turning down. We're at the end of the harvest. We're getting ready to go into the dark night. And in the spring, we're waking up. We're waking up. Our days are getting longer and our nights are getting shorter. And at that equinox, at spring, many traditions honor various things. The Celtic tradition honors the green man and the earth mother, or sometimes called the green woman, by planting seeds or even preparing the soil if your soil is still too cold yet. We're way into spring in western North Carolina, but we're about to drop way below freezing tonight. So it's that up and down that we have in the springtime. So lots of ancient mounds and stones are aligned with the sun. The Newgrange Mound in Ireland is the picture that you see, and then this one that has the red on it is looking inside. If you see this little window that's up above, on the winter solstice, the light shines in through this very small place here. This is about 3 feet wide. And this is how it looks inside at winter solstice. At Log Crua Slivnacaliac in Ireland, the light shines through on the spring and the autumn equinox and lights this stone that's at the back of the mound. Carrickhill, the moon winter solstice light comes in. And Stonehenge, we have the summer solstice at sunrise. Lots of different things to help us remember how to stay in this pattern, in this direction. So walking the beauty way is our path to the sacred. And experiencing the sacred is about the gate and the place. To get in touch with the sacred, you have to visit the gate. You are the gate. The gate is you. So you're challenged, if you're walking the beauty way, to walk the path to the present moment, to walk that path and be aware of who you are, where you are, what you're doing. Be relaxed and be respectful. You are sacred. Every breath you take is a sacred breath. If we could live our lives that way, we might live it differently. Your ego and your personality is certainly important for us while we're on this planet, in this physical world. But your ego and your personality are not who you are. They're a vehicle. And And they are what takes you through the gate. You are the gate, your personality is the gate, opening up to the sacred. So stepping through the gate takes you to a sacred place. And experiencing the sacred is a gradual unfolding, a gradual recognizing of things that are beyond our everyday normal conditioning and belief. So the purpose of what we call sacred space is to enhance our possibility of contacting that non-physical, non-rational world so that our perceptions can change, so that our conditioning and our belief is opened a little broader, a little wider. Stepping through the gate while we're in this physical world starts our journey. We have to really be strong in our intention while we're on this spiritual path, because when we do this, we have to dwell in both worlds, the physical and the non-physical. You know, you've probably heard the term, you know, having one foot in each world. Well, that's a precarious place to be. That can be rather unstable if you have one foot in one world and one foot in the other world. Trying to keep yourself balanced, trying to keep yourself going forward and staying on track with your spiritual life, with your physical life, but straddling a line is very difficult. The Celts tell us that if we're going to maintain our strength and our ability, we have to learn how to stand with both feet simultaneously in both worlds. Not an easy thing to do, but it's the critical piece of staying stable in this world as we move forward. And so what are these two worlds? Well, the energy of the two, the difference is that there's gross energy and subtle energy. The gross energy is our physicalness, our physical senses, sight, touch, taste. Those are such magnificent things, magnificent parts of our physical world. And then there's hearing and smelling. These are wonderful senses that we have. And unfortunately, we believe that's all the senses that we have access to. But there's the subtle energy, and it is very subtle. Sometimes it's hard to even realize and imagine that you're aware of the subtle energy. So let's look between the worlds. You are the gate. So right now, touch your physical body. You know, put your hands on your face or on your arms or something. Touch your body. Get a grasp. You know, do that. Hug yourself or something, and know that physical body is right there. It's solid. Now, let's go to the energy body. And so take a few breaths in and settle yourself. A breath in, a breath out, a breath in, a breath out. You might feel some little vibration. You might feel a warmth. You might even feel a coolness compared to what it was. But you might not feel anything at all. So rub your hands together and not just kind of touch them back and forth, but really get those hands rubbing. I don't know if you can see me in the screen because it's a tiny little screen that you would see, but if you can see me, I'm rubbing my hands together really fast, really fast. Rub, 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 rub. And then bring those hands up to your face. You feel a little bit of warmth coming off those hands. Well, you could go off into the logical scientific direction and say, oh yeah, that's the friction. But in reality, that warmth is your vital force. It's your chi. It's universal life energy that flows through you. Healers use this energy, and it's the energy that we encounter when we go to sacred sites. It's the energy that we encounter even when we work with just that subtle energy of pictures with the sacred site, or in our mind thinking of sacred sites. It's a very significant part of who we are. So let's talk about what sacred sites are and how they enhance your spiritual journey. I mean, I've said that you're sacred, that we're all sacred, that everything is sacred, but some things have a different vibration. And many of these are natural sites that really have a vibration different from the land around them. This is a picture of Bell Rock in Sedona, Arizona. And there are quite a few of these sites there in the Sedona area. And that there is a different vibration in this area where these particular structures are located. These are natural structures. And then there's the Grand Canyon. Oh my goodness, it's beyond explanation. It is so huge and so magnificent. And then the cliffs of Moher in Ireland that are, oh, so enormous. And Uluru. I mean, on and on. I could go on all day about these magnificent, magnificent places that carry a different energy from the rest of the land around them. It's a significant vibrational difference with these particular places. And then there are ancient sites, sacred sites that were built. Those that we just looked at were natural sites. These sites are a few that were built by people. And usually when a sacred site is built, they're built for some event that requires a higher state of consciousness than what we normally are a part of. So this could be astronomical, this could be for healing, for service, for worship, for transcendence, for rites of passage, for pilgrimage. So what happens with those events, a physical structure can add the additional support to that higher state. It can help the vibration of that higher state connect deeper into our vibrations so that we can become closer to the oneness, to the divine, to that energy of all that is. Many of the sites, the sacred sites, were placed in very specific geographical or geological places where there are waterfalls and water veins and meridians. The dolmens and the minhars, the standing stones, were placed very specifically these ancient times. Sometimes the locations were built because the land, the land itself was not doing well, because underneath the ground there were telluric channels, telluric meaning underground water channels that were not pure enough, or that were carrying something in it, or other kinds of lines underneath the earth. And so it was too intense on the surface of the earth, and so a site was built on that. Astronomical would mean the site was built so that you could measure some alignment between the stones and the stars, or mark some path of the moon and the sun. So there are 7 elements, 7 principles. There are 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And then there are 7 principles that we use as we talk about the sacred sites. Temples and whatever kinds of sacred sites there are, the energy within them gives us helps us find the ability to feel more aligned They help the physical body experience what we call well-being, feeling good. They align our energy so that our heart rate is in coherence, our emotions calm down, and just generally giving us a feeling of peace. And so the 7 principles, besides the fire, earth, air, and water, the 7 principles are water, electromagnetism, sacred measure, orientation, stones, sacred geometry, and the human element. So I'm going to talk a little more about each of these. Water is very interesting because it's one of the 7 principles, but it's also one of the 4 elements. So water is very, very strong with all of the sacred sites. There may be water flowing on top of the earth. This is a picture of the headwaters of the Sacramento River, and this is water that's coming off Mount Shasta. Now, most of us know that Mount Shasta is a sacred place, a natural place. The entire area is this different vibration. And so these are the waters coming off of Mount Shasta, forming the headwaters of the Sacramento. So we have the element of water and all that that carries with it, but the very strong healing quality of water. Our ancestors had a really close connection with the earth, and they built these structures in places to either raise the vibration or places that had a very high vibration. Most of these vibrations were because of underground water veins, and the healing quality of the water really offered so much healing and so much of a lift of the vibration. So many times the structures were built where there was a crossing of 2 or more water veins. Then electromagnetism is another of the principles. Before the rise of materialism, before industrialism, somewhere not too awfully long ago, electromagnetism was called ether. Now, when I call the directions in the center, we call that ether. We also call it divine love. We call it the center of the oneness. But electromagnetism is what the ancients called ether, connecting to the non-physical world. And so when we're talking about electromagnetism, we're talking about ley lines and vortexes and other spots on the earth. And, electromagnetism is just a regular fundamental interaction in nature, just like gravity and other things are. The ancient Egyptians had these symbols. The Ankh and the Dijet and the scepter were tools that they used to move the electromagnetism. They actually created batteries 5,000 years ago with, and these are some of the tools and instruments that were used with that. A third principle is sacred measure. Back to Egypt again, the most famous sacred measure, the oldest that's recorded as a measurement tool, is called the sacred cubit. Sometimes it's called the Egyptian royal cubit. But this is a measurement that's very specific, 20.63 inches, 524 millimeters. And they measured things with that. So it's a very specific kind of thing that was used. We think that we know what we're doing with our kinds of measurement, but they were doing this thousands of years ago, measuring the circumference of the earth, measuring the distance to the moon, things like that. Another principle of sacred sites is the orientation, north, south, east, west. And the placement of structures that were built were very, very purposely oriented with the 4 directions. Another element of the structures that were built to be sacred sites are the stones or the types of minerals that might have been used. A lot of limestone and granite and mica, different types of minerals or stone, sometimes were moved from very long distances to build the very thing that has become a sacred site. And then there's sacred geometry. Um, we could go on for days about what sacred geometry is, but it's energy meridians, grids, particular forms and shapes that were used in building these sacred sites. And then the final principle, the human element. So the human element is really the key, or it's sometimes called a switch, to bring cosmic energies into play, that the cosmic energies are there, like in the natural sites, but sometimes we need the human element to trigger it, to set it off, to put the key in the door and turn the key and open the door to it. So one of the examples I have here, this is a picture of my daughter. We were in California at the redwoods, and she is standing inside a giant redwood tree that was burned from one of the fires. The core of the tree is burned out, yet many feet on the outside are strong and steady, and you look up and the leaves are still there, the tree is growing, the tree is thriving, but the inside of it is burned out. And so she's there sensing the energy of the tree, trying to harmonize her energy with the energy that's coming off this incredible, enormous redwood tree. And then there are things like standing inside an ancient temple. This is me in Egypt in a temple, and I'm just awed and overcome by the energy of standing in this place. And then there are other kinds of human interactions that are that key or that switch. Praying or chanting inside a mosque or a temple or a church. There are so many aspects to the human element that go into play with the sacred sites. And so that's why I hope that you can have some tips on how to build your own sacred site. So standing stones and dolmens are placed on particular spots on the earth. They're like acupuncture needles. And so they put them in a particular spot, just like when you go to an acupuncturist who puts the needle or puts the acupressure in a particular spot on the meridian of your body. These standing stones are in particular meridians of the earth. There are stone circles, and there are standing stones and lots of other kinds of measurements. Aviemore in Scotland is one of the places. This is Cavendish on the Isle of Lewis in Scotland. This particular Aviemore is associated with the water element, where Cavendish is with is the dominant element there is water and air. And so these stones, thousands of years ago, were put in place for particular reasons to hold the energy and raise the vibration in a way that was helpful to the people then. Drumbeg in Ireland, excuse me, is often, another name for it is the Druid's altar. And so that's me talking to some people on one of the tours. This is a tremendously powerful energy center with lots and lots and lots of different kinds of vibration and energy there. And there's Stonehenge in the UK. Both of these, the dominant element is water. And there are standing stones that are not a part of stone circles as well. This Piper stone in Ireland, there is a stone circle that's called the Piper Stone Circle that's just a few, just a little distance from this. But this is like a guardian stone that's sitting there totally separate. You have to pass this stone first before you get to the stone circle. and its dominant element is fire. So it's like the cleansing energy. You must pass through the fire before you can step into the healing stone circle. The middle picture is Pulnabron in Ireland, and its dominant energy is fire and air. And then there's Avebury. This is one of the many stones there, and it is a fire element as well. And another type of system that was built are the mounds. This is on the one at the top is Slivna Kaliak, or also called Log Crew. Now this is on the top of not a mountain, but a very tall hill. But on the top of the hill, then they built these mounds, and there are a series of them up there. Some of them are uncovered today. This one is still covered, and you can still go inside it. But this is 114 feet or 35 meters in diameter. So it's pretty large. And then the Hag's chair that you see myself and my friend Kathy McCullough sitting in the Hag's chair, that's a pretty huge stone that's in there as well. And it's called the Hag's chair. Below, though, is one of the largest systems. This was built by moving rocks many, many, many miles away into this, plus the dirt that they mound up. This has a diameter of 85 meters or 279 feet in diameter across. This is huge. It's 43 feet or 13 meters high. And there is a stone passage inside here. The one above is associated with the water element, and it feels like a very feminine place to me. The Newgrange is an earth element, and I want you to remember that earth element because I'll talk about it again in just a couple of minutes. So this is a shot, an aerial shot, and I want you to see this because these mounds and these structures were not unconnected. Newgrange, let me go back to that. Newgrange is this enormous site, but around Newgrange are, I believe, either 2 or 3 standing stone circles separate from this, as well as some other structures that were built at different points in time. So this is a cluster of different kinds of things. Knauth, you can almost see Knauth has a number of different things. Besides the large circle, there are all these smaller ones around it. And the Knauth is predominantly a mound, a large mound as well. What's distinct about these three is that they are less than 2 miles apart, each of them. And they all have what's called a cairn or a mound, and they have passage tombs, and they have other standing stones associated. So Knauth is about 2 miles from Douth, and it's about 1.5 miles from Newgrange. Newgrange is a little over 1.5 miles from Douth. So you have 3 here in this triangle shape that are very, very closely placed together. But not only that, 15 miles south of here is Tara, which is the center of it's not necessarily the geographic center, but was a very large center for thousands of years in the history of Ireland. And 28 miles away is Log Crew that we looked at in a previous picture there. So this is a lot of mound work that were built relatively close to the same time period, and they are all older than Stonehenge. Now I mentioned that, let me go back. I mentioned that Newgrange was earth energy. Knauth is air energy. And Douth is the combination of the two. It is earth and air energy. And this is the mound that was built. That's, you just see a portion of it. It is 47 feet or 14 meters high with 280 feet. You know, it's almost as large as Newgrange. It just doesn't appear to be as large in this picture. And this is a shot looking to the inside, to the chamber, one of the two chambers that are inside Dowth. Then the mounds at Carrickhill are very interesting. This outer structure is predominantly fire energy, the element of fire, where the inside carries the element of air. This is just one of a series. You can stand on the top of this mountain and see in either direction, as far as you can see, there's another hill and another mound on top of each one of them. And there are about 18 of them. And this one, there's one that's large, closer to the size of Newgrange, but this one is 65 feet in diameter across from one side to the other. Then there are the pyramids of Giza. These have fire, earth, air, and water in the structure. And of course, they're very much related to the astronomical buildings. And this is inside the chamber. This is actually part of, these are not steps. This is a very steep angle, not quite 45-degree angle, with wood across here so that your feet don't slip backwards as you walk up it. It's quite a hike to get into any of the pyramids. And then the Sphinx, which is right beside this set of 4 pyramids, is the dominant element is earth. So you can see that these have different elemental energies, and they were all built using those 7 principles that we talked about. So there's a lot to the energetic difference of these particular spaces versus just walking out in your backyard. And then the temples are different yet. The ancient temples were specifically built on these confluence of the water elements and moving across. There's Hatshepsut's temple, which is just enormous. If you could see a person would be just like a tiny, a person wouldn't even come to the top of this ramp. So this is a huge thing. And I put the picture like this because I wanted you to see the incredible mountain that's behind it. So the energies where this temple was built are very specific. And then Kom Ombo is much closer to the Nile, and it has specific energy related to where it is. Then the mosques and temples, Buddhist temples, Jewish temples, the old, all of the older ones were, for the most part, people were still, even if they didn't consciously know that they were looking for these water elements and ley lines, they were building them on these centers with intuition. Cathedrals have the specific placement, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but they also have the sacred geometry inside. And this is the Wells Anglican Cathedral in the UK, in the city of Wales. And you can see all of these structures across here. This is part of the sacred geometry. And then the ancient Glastonbury Abbey had all sorts of sacred geometry in its building as well. This was built 712 Common Era, and has long since not been in use, where the Wells Cathedral was built in 1175, was rebuilt, revamped in 1490, and is still in use today. The Duomo in Florence, Italy, is another that's very specifically, this was absolutely built on these water confluences with underground water elements. And There are things to notice when you are in a cathedral and some churches, but cathedrals in particular. There are three specific healing spots: the door, the transept, and the altar. So the front door sets the vibration as you enter. So as you come to the front door of a cathedral, you pause and try to harmonize yourself with that energy that's at the opening there at the door. So let me go back. So you would walk up to the door and stand at the door and then put your hands on the columns, if the columns are still there, from one of these ancient churches. And they help your body go into resonance with that higher vibration that the church was built on. So it's a coherence of your heart energy and your blood flow. Now, the transept is another sacred place, and these, especially cathedrals, are built on this cross structure here. So the door, the entry door would be down here. This is where, this is called the nave. It's where the congregation would sit. This is the chancel on the right that's used by the clergy and the choir. And this confluence in the middle would have been built right here in the center, is where at least two water lines would cross over. That's why it was built there. So it's a very, very, very strong healing energy to be able to stand in that place in these ancient cathedrals that you go to. This picture is one of the side chapels, like would be one of these arms to either side of this. They too have some very strong energy. The very center is the strongest, but these are very, very healing places to just walk into. And then the altar has the most powerful energy inside the entire cathedral, because it was always placed over an intersection of the water, even if they didn't quite get it in other places. And then there are other symbols like the medicine wheel. I mean, I called the medicine wheel by the directions, but there are physical medicine wheels. There's the Vesica Pisces. I put in the Kilmakeder church or chapel. This is an ancient one that's in ruins. This is actually, there are goats wandering around in this area. But this one is important because of this particular structure. If you'll notice right at the top, there's a hole up here, and this is called the all-seeing eye. And you're supposed to be able to walk up to this all-seeing eye and see your future out in front of you and understand more about who you are. And there's the labyrinth. This is a picture of the labyrinth in Glastonbury. And this is another labyrinth that pull the energies in. When I built my labyrinth, I had chosen one of these, probably a pattern like this one or something that I intended to do. And I went out to the yard. I had a can of spray paint so that I could spray out the pattern. And then I would go back and do what I was going to do to lay it out. And I went out to the yard. I was sure where it was going to be because I don't have very much flat land on my property. And I went to this flat place and the land said, "Oh no, this is not where your labyrinth goes." And I looked around and the only other place is a pretty fairly steep hill. And I was called by the earth to put that labyrinth with two trees in the middle of it, one on to either side, and to do a circular labyrinth like this one that does not have this intricate pattern in it, but it's a circular pattern going round and round, incorporating the trees into that. So what I learned later is that there are water confluences. There's a crossover of a water confluence in the very center of my labyrinth. I was not aware of that, didn't know how to to measure that and discover that at the time that I built the labyrinth. I was just listening to that inner voice. So we're talking about harmonizing with natural cycles. And so I'd like to take you on a little inner journey, focusing on some natural cycles and connecting with yourself. You are the gate. You are the connecting point. And so I want you to think about being the gate and focus on this picture of the moon. Focus on the moon as her light is being eclipsed. This is the beginning of an eclipse. Focus on that moon and become the moon herself. And as you look at the moon and you become the moon, think about how you've been living your life so far up to this date. And then let the moon talk to you about perhaps changes that you might need to make for the future. So just focus in, take a few slow, easy breaths. Focus on that moonlight, becoming the moon, reflecting on how you've been living your life. And listen, you might have some suggestions for change. So walk with me down a path to your place in nature. Walk through the gate yourself. Breathe in and look up at the moon. Become one with her. And just listen for just a moment. And as you stand in that light of the moon, offer a prayer of gratitude for your life force energy. A prayer of gratitude for the wisdom of the divine. Gratitude for the moon and the land and the water. And open your heart to belief in the goodness of everything. And as you get ready to say goodbye to the moon for now, as you come out in harmony. Be one with beauty. Stand in the moonlight. Let her silver light flow all around you. Absorb it into your skin, into your bloodstream. And say thank you. And bring your hands together at your heart. And just bow your head a little bit in honor of the earth and the moon and the divine. And come back to the picture of the moon. And take a nice, deep, slow, easy breath. And come back to the presentation. I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to offer a challenge to you. I challenge you to start observing a cycle of nature. I challenge you to commit for the next 7 days to watch the sunset or watch the sunrise, or go outside and look at the phase of the moon for the next 7 days, or go and observe the changes in a specific plant or the blossoms on a tree, or if you still have snow, observe the melting of the snow, but find a particular cycle of nature that you watch for the next 7 days. Sometime during the day, put your attention specifically into that cycle of nature. And if you choose to join the class that I start teaching next week, that actually will be our first topic of discussion in that class. So if you found some of the things interesting today and you'd like to, go deeper and go further into it, then join my course. You can go to my website at motherearthsacredtours.net, and you can register there for the class. But also, whether you're going to take the class or not, even if you don't want to do the class, make sure that you're on my mailing list. You can go to the same address, the same site, and sign up for my newsletter if you're not already on that mailing list. So let me go back to dropping the shared screen. And so Debbie, do we have any questions that are that were in the chat?
Just 3. The first 2 will be easy, and the last one is a challenge.
Okay.
All
Give
right.
me easy first.
Okay. Libby M asks why the sun is associated with male energy, and are there solar goddesses?
Yes, there are solar goddesses. The male energy of the sun changes depending on the culture that you're in, and there are plenty of cultures that have both a male and a female deity to the sun. The Celtic sun god is Lu, L-U-G-H, but Anya is the sun goddess, and one is not any more dominant than the other. They are both sun goddess and sun god in that Celtic line. Ra in the Egyptian line is regarded as the sun god, but with the Egyptian line, you have to remember the ancient Egyptians really didn't think about these gods and goddesses as people for the most part. Mostly, these were aspects and characteristics of the divine, of the oneness. So so there's Ra, who's regarded as the sun god, but then there were multiple sun goddesses and a couple of other sun gods along the way as well. Sekhmet is one of the original sun goddesses, and there are others in there. So, and if you look deeply into the traditions, we are in this period of patriarchy. And so we give credence to the male aspect being the dominant whatever. The sun is the big one in the sky, therefore it's male dominated. But when we were in the era of patriarchy a few thousand years ago, there were very few gods and far more goddesses in the lineup for that. So yeah, there are both. And there was a question about the Was there a lunar question to that? I've forgotten.
No,
Okay.
no. Okay, next question is Christine Krum or Crom. How do you know which element is dominant?
Well, the way that I know that elements are dominant is from dowsing. Part of it is intuition as well. And I was pretty sure I knew the dominant element of each of those pictures that I put up, because I've been to all of those sites I have not been to Uluru, but I have been to all of the other sites that you saw in the pictures. And I can sense usually what the dominant element is, but I do it by dowsing, either with dowsing rods or with a pendulum, to determine what the dominant energy is. And I did them today, and I practiced it just to see what would happen. And so I would think of whichever one it was, and I would say, that's fire. And so then I would check it with dowsing, and sure enough, it would be fire. So that's and well, anyway, that's how I do it with dowsing.
Okay. Next question. This is the tough one, but it still goes with dominant. Okay. This is Baba Newbie. And the question is there a difference in meaning between dominant and in dominant and dominant in reference to the description of the elements? And she says she knows she might be nitpicking, but the inference is alternative. I don't get the last part, but anyway.
So the question is dominant or dominance? Is that?
No, they're both dominant. And then, so I'll read it again. Is there a difference in meaning between dominant and in dominant in reference to the description of the elements?
Well, let me see if I can answer it. And if I'm not answering it well, go back in and give me another question to help me with it. The sacred site, like, let me take Newgrange, because that one is earth. So Newgrange has its vibration. It has its energy. When you go to it or you look at the picture of it and you work specifically with the energy, it has particular elements. I mean, Newgrange has this tunnel that really in the ancient days was used for shamanic journeying. So it's a place to take you deeper into the introspection of looking within yourself and becoming one with the highest good, one that all that is. So in addition to that vibration, the dominant element energy that's with that is earth, because it just leans more toward the earthly aspects of the feeling, the touching, the substance to it, where Log Crew or Slivna Kaliak, the dominant element associated with that is water. The two mounds, I mean, they're both mounds. They both have these chambers that were built for the same purpose. But when I walk into Log Crew, I feel like the water is washing over me. I feel like it's just whoosh, cleansing across. And I feel like I'm going, like I'm in water, where when I go into Newgrange, I feel like I'm going underground. And there are other mounds where I feel like, whoa, it's hot in here, because it has fire energy to it.
Okay,
So,
we have a clarification. And Baba is looking at the spelling of dominate as in seeking to control, versus dominant, which Baba imagines is the messaging the main element present. So I think that's correct. The main element.
It's not that the element controls you or controls the sacred site. It's just that it's the vibration that's there. It's like if you go into a mound that has the fire that is that the dominant, where the dominant energy of the element is fire, you're going into a place where you can cleanse yourself with that fire energy, where you can cut loose these things that you don't want to carry on with you anymore. So it's none of them are dominant in terms of forcing the energy on you. It's just that when you walk into that particular site, or you look at it and work with the energy of it, it's easier, okay? Not easy, but easier to work with the characteristics of that element to help you in your spiritual growth.
Terrific. Colleen Finnegan would like to know more about the water that crosses where churches were built in cross shapes. Do you mean underground streams?
Yes.
And how did they know this such a long time ago when big churches and cathedrals were built?
Yeah, Farron Blasco is an author. He wrote a book called Where Heaven and Earth Unite. And I had a quote of him in the presentation. And Farron talks a lot about that. And there are quite a few other people as well. I think he's my guru on this. Farron says that the ancients, like not just 5,000 years ago, but even 1,000 years ago, very much were in the people who chose to be architects were very much in touch with that energy within them that would help them be able to sense that. Today we have people who are called water dowsers, and water dowsers go out and find the spot where you can dig your well, and it won't be so far down and things like that. And so these folks were very sensitive to being able to feel the underground water channels that were in there. And, you know, a person who can dowse well can go out into a yard and find those water lines.
Terrific. Next question. Any recommendations on transferring trauma to Mother Earth? And do you know of any Wiccan groups in the Asheville area? That's from Jesse Sharp.
Ah, hi, Jesse. Let's see, Byron Ballard is the high priestess of the local Wiccan coven. I think that's the right word. I'm not Wiccan, so I'm not sure I have the right terms in there, but Byron, and Jesse, I will try to get you the website. I get Byron's mailings, and so I will try to get that to you on that aspect. But with the trauma of Mother Earth, it's a very complicated situation, because Mother Earth is there when we are functional and we are healthy with what we're doing. She is there to take our trauma, to hold our trauma for us. She is our support, our mother beneath us, and there to truly help us let go of what we need to release and let it go into the earth. What we've done today is really do a lot of pollution to the earth. So many of our elements are, you know, much of our water is no longer pure. It's polluted and the soil is polluted. And so there are so many different aspects of that. And it's, those are all symbols of a culture out of control. We are spinning out of control. And so those of us who have the insight, who are the light workers, who care about what we're doing, it's our job to uplift the consciousness of what's happening in the world today. We can't do it all. And that can cause us sometimes to say, oh, there's too much, whatever I do won't matter. Everything that you do matters. Every thought that you think goes out into the ethers. And so what we do, what we say, what we think does make a difference. And if we put absolute intention into what we're doing and meditate through that intention, we can make far more progress than we realize. But we also can do far more damage than we realize by not paying attention to what we say and what we do and what we think.
At this point, there were no more questions, but Jade Tilp did let us know that in Japan, there is a sun goddess, and her name is Amaterasu.
Oh, wonderful.
Or I may not have the inflection in the right place.
Right. But that's
So.
in the chat. So I'll get to see the chat later and look at
Oh,
it.
good.
Yeah.
And there's lots of thanks and appreciation for the presentation.
Okay. Anything else, anyone? We're down to about 40 people now, so we could, let me see. Let me